Welcome to the It's One Louder podcast. Your host, PJ Pat, has done absolutely nothing that you would know about, but don't fret. Turn up the volume one louder and enjoy the show.
Welcome to the show, everybody. This is your best bud, PJ Pat, and my trustworthy partner here, Jim. He's feeling a little quirky today, so I'll just let him hang out and do what he does. I don't judge here. Really special show today. I will be reading an interview from the one and only Joe Armstrong from Green Day, specifically about his acoustic art and his acoustic songs and just anything acoustic from this guitar magazine entitled Acoustic Rock. Here, watch out, Jim. This one right here. Now, we read Slash's article, so if you want to go back and look at that episode or listen to that episode on any streaming platform, what Slash reveals in that interview, amongst other things, is that he's written a lot of the hard rock and GNR songs on an acoustic. That's how it starts off. So let's see what Joe Armstrong has to say about his songwriting philosophy and if it involves an acoustic or not. All right, check this out. Look at that. Look at this spread. Look at that. Great picture. I guess this is around the time where American Idiot came out, which is one of my favorite Green Day albums, by the way, because it's right there on the cover of the article here. Billy Joe Strummer. Green Day's Joe Armstrong discusses the role of the acoustic guitar throughout the band's history and examines the instrument's particular prominence on their 2004 opus, American Idiot. Article by Alan DiPerna, that's D-I-P-E-R-N-A, reprinted from Guitar World Acoustic, February/March 2005. Okay, so yeah, it was written shortly after the album came out. Very cool. I want to prove that the acoustic guitar can be a tough instrument, says Green Day's Joe Armstrong. A lot of the times when people bring up acoustic guitar, you get an image of someone sitting in a hallway singing, "I Gave My Love a Cherry." While he's widely hailed as the godfather of current pop punk and the warped generation archetypal snot-nosed wise guy, Armstrong is no stranger to the acoustic. After all, Green Day's biggest hit to date was the 1997 acoustic-driven ballad, Good Riddance, Time of Your Life. Acoustic guitar also played a prominent role on the band's excellent 2000 album, Warning. But Billy Joe relied more heavily on the instrument than ever before to create Green Day's American Idiot. Acoustic guitar is woven throughout the disc, lending depth and punch to the album's adrenaline-paced rock songs and playing a more prominent role on reflective ballads like Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Give Me Novocaine, and Armstrong's powerful rumination on his father's death, Wake Me Up When September Ends. Armstrong never uses the acoustic simply for the sake of doing so, but rather demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of how the instrument can be used in a punk context. American Idiot is many things, but no one would mistake it for "I Gave My Love a Cherry," quote unquote. So what is it? For one thing, a powerful album that successfully mixes introspective material with some of Green Day's most overt political statements. Barbed topical allusions abound in songs like Holiday, with its references to President Gasman and the representative from California. More ambitiously, it is the first punk opera ever recorded with a recurring main character, Jesus of Suburbia, whose experiences clearly are meant to represent a dysfunctional American society riddled with Ritalin kids, reality TV, and what is obviously most dangerous of all in Armstrong's mind, a mendacious and irresponsible administration in Washington. We've always thought of ourselves as punks, says Armstrong, but for me, this goes beyond punk rock. Concern for what's going on in the world shouldn't just be an underground movement, but in the mainstream too. Somebody like John Lennon wasn't a punk, but he definitely acted like one. It's always been important for me to share my opinions a little bit. Joe Armstrong is one tough guy. No wonder he's playing acoustic guitar. Okay, Acoustic Rock asks, American Idiot is by far your most political album. In some ways, it's very much in the folk protest song tradition, right now to your heavy reliance on the acoustic guitar. Joe Armstrong says, yeah, but I didn't want to come off as some guy in the park with an acoustic geeking out with a bunch of crystals. For me, it is a question of, how do you get your message across and still remain tough without looking like a hippie? I think that's why Bob Dylan and late Clash singer and guitarist Joe Strummer have more in common than, say, Bob Dylan and Arlo Guthrie. Think of songs like Dylan's Masters of War, an angry song that he played on acoustic but could have easily been recorded on electric. Did you find it difficult to avoid sounding stilted or preachy on the political material? Armstrong says, "It came down to just doing it. For me, it comes from the same source of inspiration as writing a love song. You can't really fake something like that. You can't write a song about a girl just for the sake of having a hit. The same goes for writing political songs. They have to be focused and inspired." What message are you trying to impart with these songs? That there are more people than ever who feel disenfranchised. That instead of having 4 years of redneck agenda, it's going to be 8. Acoustic Guitar asks, how would you characterize your use of acoustic guitar on the albums? Billy Joe says, it's played pretty much throughout the entire record, mostly underneath the electrics. I wanted to take advantage of the acoustic's percussive qualities. The dynamics come out a little more with the acoustic guitar on there. The acoustic is sort of like a character on the album. Sometimes you don't realize it's there. By the time a predominantly acoustic song like Wake Me Up When September Ends comes along, you've been hearing the character throughout the record, then suddenly it chimes through. AR states, Wake Me Up When September Ends pivots around an acoustic guitar figure in which the open G string really rings out. Did that come first when you were writing that song? No, the drum beat came first. It was very simple. That song was laid out as sort of a sketch that we flip-flopped with a little bit. But producer Rob Cavallo said, let's see how much we can bring this song out. Let's give it more of an introduction and see if we can really build the song from something that's really quiet to something that's huge at the end. AR says, the song has that cool C major to C minor chord change. Yeah, that's one of my favorite chord changes of all time. It's got that sort of sad Beatles/Dave Clark 5 kind of thing about it. It sends chills up your spine. For rock musicians, these things are ingrained in your mind somewhere. Either you access that kind of stuff, or you end up playing in drop D for the rest of your life. What acoustic did you use for that song? The other songs? I used an Alvarez Yeri pretty much on the entire album. There were a couple of other ones lying around, including a Gibson J200, but the main acoustic is the Yeri. I don't know the model number off the top of my head, but I know I got it in Japan. I didn't really know what I was getting. On the lyric sheet included in the booklet accompanying the American Idiot CD, many of the songs have dates and sometimes places noted near the titles. Why? That has to do with the operatic concept of the album. We did that to help track the characters in the songs and to give a timeline to the series of events. AR asks, the date for Wake Me Up When September Ends is September 10th, which is, of course, one day before the 11th, and it's track number 11 on the album. Armstrong replies, I never thought about it being the 11th song on the record before. That's kind of eerie. A lot of people are going to view that song as a reflection of 9/11, but that was not my intention in writing it. For me, September is the month my father died. People's lives tend to go in cycles, the best times and the worst times of their lives. And September always ends up being that worst time for me. For some reason, problems always keep cropping up for me in September. It's a heavy month. People are going back to school. There's a change in the weather. It feels like the end and the beginning of something much more than December 31st. Another big acoustic number on the album is Boulevard of Broken Dreams. How did that one come together? Billy Joe answers, my kid is starting to play drums, so I put a 4-track in his room. And then I got inspired to start messing around with that song in his bedroom. It just ended up writing itself. That was an acoustic song for sure, but what I wanted to do was split it between electric and acoustic. And one thing I really wanted to do was to get it into transition nicely from the song that comes before it, Holiday. Holiday was originally written in E minor, and Boulevard was written in F sharp. And I said, what if we connected these? So I did them both in F, with a capo on the first fret. That's the thing I tried to do throughout the record. If you geek out and listen close enough, all the keys are relevant to each other from song to song. Boulevard goes from F sharp down to E on the very last note. So you go from that E into the next song, Are We the Waiting, which is an A. It's sort of a nice segue. AR asks, what approach did you take to recording the acoustic guitars? The main thing was I didn't want to go direct with any kind of built-in pickup straight into the board. For some reason, that always takes away the attack, softens the sound. I hate that direct sound, so we use mic placement the whole time. Was your first guitar an acoustic? I played an acoustic for a couple of months when I was a kid. I must have been about 4 or 5 years old. Music has always been in my household, whether it was my dad playing jazz or my sister playing clarinet or something like that. And we always had an acoustic guitar around the house. Just a piece of shit nylon string. My sister tried to play it for a while, but that never really panned out. So it was just laying around for me to toy with. I remember really liking the acoustic guitar as a kid. It looked tough on Elvis Presley for some reason, even though he was barely even playing. Was any of the early Green Day material written on acoustic guitar? Armstrong says, yeah, a lot of the stuff. When I was a freshman in high school, I got a 12-string. I can't remember the brand. My mother got it from this guy who specialized in finding illegal instruments, stolen goods, as they say. I just played it all the time. And I think that's what I really started to write songs on. I ended up smashing the thing when I was about 18 years old, living in a warehouse in Oakland. But I would say songs from our earliest days like 1,000 Hours and Only From You, from 1991's 1039/Smoothed Out, Slappy Hours, were written on that guitar. So Acoustic Guitar asks, but by the time of your breakthrough album, 1994's Dookie, you were writing more on electric? I think the more important transition for me was from writing on any guitar to writing in my head a little more, doing it mentally rather than coming up with guitar riffs and then basing a song on that. Did that make a big difference for you? I think so. The older you get, you become more ambitious, but you also become more self-conscious. So I was writing in secret a little bit more by the time of Dookie. I had no audience at first, but when people actually started showing up to Green Day gigs and buying our records, there was much more pressure and more criticism. So I ended up doing it in my world a little bit more. Who are some of your favorite songwriters? The first person who comes to mind is John Lennon, also Elvis Costello and David Bowie. And I really love the first Generation X album. I'm really more of a fan of songs and not songwriters so much. Like that Christina Aguilera song, Beautiful, that's a good song. I hate to say it, and I would never call Christina Aguilera one of my favorite songwriters, but I like good music, you know? What about acoustic guitarists? Armstrong says, Bob Dylan, certainly. Songs like It's Alright Ma, I'm Only Bleeding are so tough. That chord riff he plays after every chorus, it's like he's hammering on it. I like that angry sentiment he projects there, that real physical side of the acoustic guitar. The same with Pete Townsend. I love the way he sort of accents the drums with the acoustics on songs like Substitute and Pinball Wizard. Given Green Day's history as punk rockers, it's interesting that the almost completely acoustic Good Riddance, Time of Your Life from 1997's Nimrod has been your biggest hit single to date. Armstrong says, I wrote that right around when we were recording Dookie. I didn't really think of it as being for an album or anything. It's about an ex-girlfriend who had moved to Ecuador. In the song, I tried to be completely level-headed about her leaving, even though I was completely pissed off. So I named it Good Riddance, just to express my anger. Did the huge effect of that song embolden you to use more acoustic guitars on 2000's Warning? Yeah, I started getting into acoustic more and used one on Hold On, Warning, Macy's Day Parade, and some of the other songs on that album. I was trying to make the acoustic guitar sound like a percussive instrument, the way Pete Townsend does. I mainly played a Taylor on those songs, and also the same guild that I used on Time of Your Life. Do you always play with a pick? Do you ever finger pick? I pretty much always play with a pick. I can do a little bit of finger picking, but I don't like to get too Simon and Garfunkel. You gotta watch yourself on that stuff. Has Green Day ever played an acoustic show? Yeah, we've done the benefit for the bridge school that Neil Young puts on every year. Hey, Neil Young, look at that. What a coincidence. Wearing a man shirt right here. The Godfather himself. And in the early days, we always brought an acoustic guitar on tour with us. Our shows back then were booked in basements and veterans halls by kids who didn't always have the proper legal permits and all that. So when a show would be shut down for exceeding the noise levels, we would have an acoustic there and still be able to play. I think that's one thing we had over a lot of other punk bands. The show was able to go on. There was a picture of us on the back of 1992's Kerplunk in which Trey Cool, the drummer, is holding an acoustic guitar. That picture was taken in Tucson, Arizona, where the show was shut down because people down the street complained about the noise. AR says, I imagine your song sounded pretty good on acoustic. Yeah, I mean, they ended up sounding like the Violent Femmes, but they were still okay. All right, and that's a wrap. Well, hope you enjoyed that one. I remember when the album Dookie came out, I wasn't really into the band. They weren't really on my radar. But I remember my brother had purchased the album, and which was a little odd because he wasn't really into that kind of music. So I found that really odd. I'm like, what the? You, who's not really into rock, buys this album? I definitely got to check this out. So when I put the cassette in, yes, folks, cassette, it just blew me away. Wow. I never heard anything like that. And that was the whole start of the pop punk movement. They are definitely the pioneers of that. That's for sure. I haven't heard their stuff in a while, so you know what? I'm going to go crank it up right now. If you haven't either, let's go. Do the same, and I'll meet you on the next one. Well, that concludes the episode. Thanks for hanging around. We'll see you in the next one. Want to say bye-bye? Thank you so much for making it to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty. Connect with me on Facebook. We have an It's One Louder podcast page there, and hopefully we can exchange messages there. Rock on, everybody. We'll see you on the next one. Thank you.